Welcome back, y'all, to another episode of Hip Hop Babies.
Yes, sir, ski.
What we talking about?
J. Cole, 2014 Forest Hills Drive. Classic. We getting into classic reviews.
We're talking about the 10-year anniversary. We're talking about the deluxe, some of the little songs that he left off of it. He put on the end. So we're going to be talking about the original project, but then we're going to be talking about the new stuff because everybody kind of already knows about the original project, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got your feelings about this. I mean, to me, this is the second best J. Cole album of his career.
What's the first?
Born Sinner.
Okay, ball. You just like me for real. That makes sense.
He peaked there, and then this was right after the peak, in my opinion. I just felt like, he was really coming into form back then. I feel that way now. Like, I listen to these songs. I listen to the old songs. I listen to the newer old songs, the ones that got cut from the album, and I'm just like, man, he was in a different bag back in this era. This is when he was a part of the big three, in my opinion. Way back when. Nowadays it's like, you have that big three talk, but it don't hit the same like it did back in 2014, 2015.
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. J. Cole is one of those artists that has been making music like this for years. Even back when it dropped, it was kind of corny. And you have songs like Wet Dreams on here. It is what it is, you know what I'm saying? He has some corny references on here that haven't lasted.
How old was you? You was like 16, bro. You wasn't listening to Wet Dreams saying that was corny. You was like, that was fire, bro.
Bro, I was listening to that saying it was a little corny. But here's the thing. Corny doesn't always equate to bad. And I think that this is one of those albums that have helped show that, right? I think J. Cole is one of those artists that, you bring up Born Sinner. Born Sinner is my favorite project by him as well. I think this project is one of those projects where a lot of other people, this is their best project by J. Cole, right? And I think it's for a reason. This was 2014 when it officially came out, right? That was my junior year. I think for you, maybe sophomore year.
I was a sophomore. Yeah, I think so. Or I was on the back end of my freshman year or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But when this came out, this was different. This was like, oh, okay, J. Cole is like really going into his background. He's even the first track, January 28th, which is one of my favorite J. Cole tracks. He's going into his past life. He's going into, struggling to keep true to himself while he's making it bigger at this point. It's a crazy listen now because it's like, man, he was challenging shit. Like, he was like one of those artists that was like really upfront, really personal. This is what I'm bringing to the table. If you don't like it, forget you, right?
I never felt like J. Cole was like a deep rapper, but like he always challenged like societal norms. I feel like in a time where it was corny to do something like that, like it was very much so like, especially in this type of era, it was like edginess was like peak humor. Like people were just saying shit that they knew was out of pocket to get a rise out of people and stuff like that. And J. Cole was very much so on the forward-thinking side of things, having a forward-thinking perspective, I think, out of anybody who would normally be listening to him, especially because I feel like in the early 2010s, the view on rap and like how rap was, like, I feel like there was a lot of people who were saying rap was like heavily misogynistic, heavily, oriented towards violence and stuff like that, and even though I might have said that there was more to it, that was the narrative at the time. I felt like that was really the prevailing narrative, and that was kind of something that shaped J. Cole in a way and how he approached the game, because he was very much so anti that kind of stuff, even though he would sometimes get into that bag where he was getting a little ignorant or he was doing a little something, like saying, get off my dick, like that was like him, like giving into like the mainstream a little bit. I felt like he had the best perspective of like what he brought to the game when he came onto this project. Like, Born Sinner is my favorite, like thematically and, throughout, like how it was like cohesive and stuff. But like, I feel like this one, as far as just like J. Cole knowing what he is as an artist, like this was the best one. And I think that gets highlighted by the tracks that we got on the deluxe, right? Because a lot of the deluxe tracks I felt like were good enough to actually be on this project.
Bro,
Like,
Winter Wonderland is crazy. You know, as we're getting into like, you know, bonus tracks that are crazy. Listening to those tracks was like a throwback.
But like you never heard it before.
No, that's what I'm saying. I never heard it, even if let's say that's one of those tracks that have leaked or one of those tracks that people know online. I ain't heard it. And it
Me
was
neither.
a moment to just hear J. Cole in that bag again, like you're saying. J. Cole during this album, he could not miss. For me, this album is a classic, but it's one of those albums where after a certain point, I'm not really as favorable about certain tracks as other people were. But I do think that even then, those tracks have grown on me.
I just felt like he had like his heart in the right place when he was making this project. Like, you know, like Love Yours is one of the best songs on here, in my opinion. He was just really trying to spit like authentic game. That's something that like real rappers or like, you know, the premier rappers do, is they share perspective. They share, you know, some of life's biggest lessons, you know. As somebody who was a impressionable youth at the time that I was first listening to this, I could definitely say that, you know, Love Yours made an impact on me, just about, you know, being appreciative for the things that I had, you know, even if I at the time thinking that it wasn't too much, you know, you do have to be thankful for the things you have. You do have to be thankful. It's simple to say, like us now, like we're 25, 27, like, yeah, it's simple to say, but like me, when I was first listening to this, and like a lot of people that are first listening to these projects, like this stuff hits, you know, and like he did have his heart in a good place on this whole thing. And like, also, bro, like he came to kill it. Like I remember hearing Fire Squad for the first time, Tales Two Cities for the first time, No Role Models for the first time, and I even go back and I'm now more appreciative of the slower tracks. Like I didn't think that Saint Tropez was like that good of a track when I was.
I agree.
When I listened to it.
I agree.
When I listen to it now, and it's got more space to breathe, and I got more patience, you know, and I'm like, okay. Like the instrumental on here really do be hidden. You know, the lyrics on here really do be hidden. It's just one of those albums that you go back and you listen to and you like, I really like this when I first listened to it, and now I'm listening to it again. I still like it, but probably in a different way, but I still like it. Like you said, like Wet Dreams, like obviously is not like the best aging song. It's not the best aging song. But when it first came out, I'm trying to like really think back, and I was really not like caring too much about like, you know, like what's corny and what's not, you know, and like you have that like ignorance to you, that little aloofness to you. You like, this is a good song, bro. Like it's just like the way that he tells the story is good, even if what he's talking about is really trivial, really stupid, whatever. The fucking music video is about dogs, but like when I'm listening to it as a kid, I'm just like, you peel back like what he's actually talking about, the storytelling on here. You go back to Winter Wonderland, like you talking about his relationship with his mom's boyfriend and stuff like that. Stuff I can definitely relate to. I don't know how many boyfriends my mom's had when I was growing up. He just knows how to put it into words that like you can't really describe. You can't really say nothing bad against it, because it's just like he's talking from a place of realness. And it just comes off as really authentic. That's something that has been missing from J. Cole's music since this moment, in my opinion. For Your Eyes Only, he was talking his real perspective. I wasn't relating to that, bro. When he was talking about on here, I felt like really related to his early 20s, that kind of stuff, like stuff that I know now. We always talk about a lot of times where artists don't grow with their audience. He might have outgrown his audience after this project. This is when he mostly connected with like the people that was listening to him, people our age. You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. He was really introspective on this project. On January 28th, talking about don't give him too much you, don't let it take your soul and shit. Like, J. Cole was bordering on some deeper, darker topics on this album. And I think when you get more into it, that vulnerability, 03 Adolescence, super introspective, not being afraid to be open, especially at this point in his career. I think that J. Cole relate to a lot of people has to do with the fact that he was so open in a time where it wasn't that cool to be open. I mean, of course, you know, we have certain rappers, we have certain people in the past that, you know, have paved the way, but J. Cole was your open book, and that's surprising.
That's really what I'm talking about. Like he might have like moved past like his audience and stuff, because like he did have that moment of like clarity, you know, like I just feel like Born Center in this album, like he was having a moment of clarity, like where he was really like just being himself. People were getting made fun of for being themselves, like, or it was underappreciated for being themselves. I would say like Drake being himself, he was made fun of. Kendrick being himself, he was overlooked. J. Cole being himself, he was kind of like that middle mix where people were like, who liked Drake but also like Kendrick, they were liking J. Cole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he could do the hits, but he could also talk about like himself and he could be like open and personable. And like that was really what people were drawn to. And like when people were talking about like a true like conscious rapper, like back in the day, we were talking about just people who were like talking about like what they actually were. They were being real. You know, they weren't being fake. They weren't putting on a facade. They weren't trying to be like a party type of rapper or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get the club turned up or something, you know, like trying to make a pop hit or something. Like he was really like sticking to that storytelling and being your true self type of music. Obviously, I think like as time has gone on, as he's opened up lanes for other rappers, like obviously there's more people who have more like tapped in intellects and like they know more things. And that's why I feel like his music hasn't necessarily aged all that great, because the stuff he talks about, it isn't like super deep. It isn't super like conscious like that. Like but he was one of the first like building blocks. If J. Cole can say some stuff like this, like then other people in our generation can say stuff that's even further. They can build upon it. They can expand upon
Mm-hmm.
it. And I felt like he was just like kind of a fish out of water when he was doing that beef with No Name, because No Name, like she's super progressive. Like as far as like politics and like, identity stuff goes, right? Like she's super progressive and like she's super like conscious of this stuff. And he's not like necessarily on that same like intellectual plane, but like he is on that same plane of like I'm gonna be open about who I am and who I am as a person and show people, you know, my perspective so that people can learn from where I'm at. And I feel like that's kind of where that narrative comes from, where people were always being like, oh yeah, when people listen to J. Cole, they like fake intellects. Like, no, you're not a fake intellect because you listen to J. Cole. I feel like it's like that first building block of I really want to be able to like share my perspective. I really want to be able to like let people know what I am, what I do. And he does it in a way that's just like really personable. Like people really can relate to it because he's not going into stuff that's like too deep. He's still kind of abstract with it. He still keeps it on like a surface level almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like general ideologies. When people say his music is dated or we move past his music, it's because that was like a building block, I feel like, for a lot of us. For a lot of us.
I get what you're saying, bro, but to a certain degree, I have to disagree. I don't think J. Cole is a building block. I think J. Cole is one of the better rappers in the game, even still to this day. I think I get what you're saying, where it's like J. Cole was really exceptional for his time, but I do think that J. Cole, even with some of these songs on here, January 20th is one of the best tracks I've ever heard. He's spitting his ass off on that. There's no taking away from that. A Tale of Two Cities, I played that track out. Hands in the air. Now that old Swiss Beats vibe, I feel like J. Cole had that good balance of old school and new school. And I get what you're saying, where it's like, well, this might be the first time someone has heard something like that. But to me, this isn't the first time I heard something like that. Wet Dreams, maybe to a certain degree, that was a little exceptional. Fire Squad, talk about white people stealing our sound, Iggy Azalea. For that time period, that was relevant, right? But then you go later into the album, and this is the part of the album that didn't really connect with me at first, where you go into Saint Tropez. I love Get Off My Dick. I love No Role Models, right? But then when you get past that, those tracks were not my steez. It was too much singing, especially at the time. I was really into my old head, super like, this is what I grew up on. He was singing a lot of these tracks past that point, after No Role Models, right? Hello, Apparently, Love Yours, Note to Self. I appreciate those tracks more now because, like you said, I've had time to grow with them, and I've also realized that J. Cole was doing something, this was really personal for him, and he had to get these things off his chest. And I feel like as I've grown, those tracks have grown with me a little bit more. And this album is a classic because of that. I feel like J. Cole is one of those artists that where I guess you could put him in a box and just say at the time he was challenging things. But to me, when you go into like Might Delete Later,
So, might delete later. Yeah.
he's not challenging my mental capacity as far as rap goes as much as he used to be. But back in the day, he was doing that. In 2014, this was a little bit of a different balance, even for me. And I feel like the bonus tracks add to that a lot. The storytelling. I think the storytelling on this album is amazing. You know, people bring up For Your Eyes Only. For Your Eyes Only isn't my favorite J. Cole album. It's cool. I respect. I don't hate on that. But to me, this album was the perfect balance of that storytelling, lyricism. I'm that dude. I'm signed to Rock Nation. I'm coming out the gate, dropping crazy shit. You get what I'm saying?
He was like on top, right? And like he did have the ability to do like all that stuff where like he could have dropped 13 tracks of No Role Models or 13 tracks to Get Off My
Yes.
Dick, you know what I'm saying? But like he took that platform and he was able to make songs like that, but also make songs like apparently Love Yours,
Yes.
you know, and like I'm gonna be honest, like I liked every track except for Saint Tropez.
Off the gate?
That
Out the gate?
or Note to Self, because that song is just way too.
Note to Self reminds me, and you know, he was a big Kanye fan. Last Call, thanks. He was a big Kanye fan, so that was like obviously an influence. He's on Rock Nation.
I get you, like, and that's why I didn't. When I was growing up, I really liked Hello. Like, apparently, even though he did have singing on it, I felt like the messages resonated enough to where I was still into him. I really connected with all the tracks on there. I wasn't really, I don't know, thinking about singing as much. As time goes on, like, obviously nowadays, like, nobody gives a fuck if a rapper is singing. But, like, back in the day, if we go back to 2014, like, people did care if a rapper was singing. They was calling them soft. They was calling them, you know, feminine. They was calling them all these things, you know, like if a rapper was singing, especially if it wasn't good. If it was good, it was like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
You are embarrassing yourself on this track. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like I never really looked at him like that in that sense. Those tracks, like he was going for something that was like above rap in a way, you know, like just the way that he was going on these perspectives. And I always liked this album. I always call this album a classic. The majority of it, I fucked with. There was a couple parts where I didn't. I would always call it a classic because like it was such a moment for so many people, including myself. Just like I feel like I can see where I was in life at that moment. When I think about this album, when I go back to these tracks, like I can see exactly where I was, and that's special, man. Like anytime you like can like associate a project or something with a period in your life, that's special. You hold on to that. That's like a memory booster right there. This is one of those projects where it was like when people was talking about the big three, like I was talking about, this is one of the albums you was pointing to and being like, yeah, bro, you know, he's talking about how he snatched the crown. And, you know, talking about, you know, the Grammys and shit, how the Grammys don't mean shit. And it's like really like what we talking about, like what the people who actually follow hip hop talking about, like that's what matters. You know what I'm saying? Hip hop discourse and hip hop people just talking about his music. And I felt like he was really so pro the culture, like pushing the culture along. You know, he was instrumental in that time for keeping people engaged when, you know, I felt like the 2000s, like even though like me and you like got a lot from the 2000s, mainstream, they wasn't getting nothing from hip hop in the 2000s. It was booming for sure, but it was like when we get to the 2000s, that was really when people was hating and saying we was on a decline because we was outside the golden age. We was like, we wasn't in the 80s, 90s no more. We was past that. You know, Pac, Biggie was dead. We moving on to the 2000s and like, who do we really got to take the crown for? Bro, but then we get to the 2010s, right? And it's like really like who's taking over in the 2010s, and like I feel like J. Cole picked up a lot of slack where like a lot of other people wasn't able to break through on mainstream. Like he was really able to be like one of those artists, and that's why we revere him so much. We clown on J. Cole nowadays, but like he was revered back in the day, like because I feel like he was really pushing the culture forward in a way that it wasn't getting pushed by many other people. Even if people were doing some like introspective, like, you know, like in-depth shit, like they weren't in the mainstream lens, and he was.
Yes.
And he was able to do this in this moment, and it was really pivotal for a lot of people. He kept the original spirit of hip-hop going on when he could have just took a check. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
And,
especially being signed to Rock Nation. He definitely kept a good balance. You know, getting him back into the second half of this album, you know, he knew that it was going to catch some people's ears maybe in the wrong way. Because it's like, As someone who was a hip hop fan at the time, I wasn't trying to hear a rapper sing. I grew up a certain way. I grew up hearing Jay-Z. I grew up hearing Nas. Even Kendrick. Kendrick used to sing sometimes, but he wasn't singing like that. You know what I'm saying? It's a little different. I've grown to appreciate the later end of this album. And I do think the bonus tracks also add a lot. J. Cole was telling a fucking story. J. Cole was telling a story on most, if not all, of these bonus tracks. This album was one of those peak rapping forms of J. Cole where I feel like he could rap about anything and it was going to sound good. Like, Die Together, crazy. Gotta make sure your kid's straight, gotta get your money together, gotta make sure everything's good. Judgment Day, toxic relationship, bad breakup. She was lying on him. He lost his job. He lost his whole life. He crashed out. It's not okay, but the way he paints that picture is crazy to me. Like, but man, this could have made the album, right? Wonderland, highlight. How far he's came, quotable. Swear I gotta make it out or I'm a goner, man. I want to see New York or even California, man. So I'm gonna kill this shit and hope that I'm a wanted man. Like, J. Cole at this point was a good balance of hungry and a good balance of knowing how to make music that was gonna be a hit. He had no features on this, man. I mean, besides the bonus tracks, of course, right?
I feel like he moved away from storytelling a little
Yes,
bit.
sir.
You know, like he's more just seeing like what he can do technically or like bars wise, and that's where we get the lines like "put an M on his head." He Luigi brother now. He not putting an M on nobody's head. You know, like he's not talking about like a perspective that like he really is like living. He's just kind of like saying shit that like he thinks is witty or like, you know, funny. Rappers sometimes they get hyper fixated on certain things like technical ability, bars, stuff like that, and it to the point where it just comes off as like unauthentic. I would say for J. Cole, especially during this era, he comes off as very authentic. He comes off as very real, something that like he speaks from. And like he was experimenting in this time and For Your Eyes Only, you know, trying to tell a story through somebody else's perspective. Because he was already running out of stuff that he was talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like he was learning lessons from other people. And then once we get past this point and we get past For Your Eyes Only, what does he really have to talk about left? Like what does he really have to say about his life? He doesn't have much to say, but he's crowned as like one of the best rappers, right? So he wants to prove that he's one of these best rappers. So he's making these lines and this stuff, and it's like he's feeding this corny narrative because it's like he's making these corny ass lines, but he's not doing that authentically himself. He's doing that because he thinks he's like one of the better rappers. If he was one of the better rappers, he would have stood up to Kendrick when Kendrick was.
No, see, you're making it about something. I respect your opinion, and this is where we differ, though. I feel like J. Cole is one of those rappers that I'm not gonna say he's aged that badly with time. I think that I get what you're saying, where it might come off extra corny, it might come off like he's reaching, but to me, even with K.O.D, a lot of people don't really like K.O.D. I thought K.O.D was solid, and I will say this. J. Cole is trying to find his place when it comes to being compared to certain other people who are, you know, of course, pushing the genre forward. And I think that he's found his own way to do that, but it's not as good sometimes. But to me, J. Cole is still, he's rapping. And I think this project,
100%.
And this project, especially with the bonus tracks, it kind of puts into perspective like this was legit top tier storytelling with these bonus tracks. Keep Heaven Dancing, yes. Love Lost, Miles, adding a feature to the track list with Bone Thugs and Harmony. Notorious Thugs, Interpolation, man, that's crazy to me. I love Notorious Thugs. That's like one of my favorite tracks. It had me going back to play that track. Just hearing them redo that, right? Even now sometimes, I have to really sit back and give J. Cole his props because it's like, he's still rapping his ass off. He's still one of the better rappers in the game. It just doesn't connect all the time.
It's just much. This is the thing, right? Like, when you were in this era, with Kendrick and Drake, and like you were being debated as one of the top 3 rappers of the time, it builds your ego up in a certain way. It builds you, you know, like in your head, like how you're going to be, how you're perceived by other people. So you feel like you need to address that a lot of times. And I feel like from this point forward, he had addressed it a lot of times, and he had said like he was the best rapper. He was doing this and this, and he was doing this and this. And the moment you start feeding into that and you start saying stuff like that is when you start to decline, because like, all right, bro, like we get it. This is what you think, right? Like, but what about you in general as an artist, or what about you as a person is changing, evolving? How are you seeing yourself from in like what lens, right? And J. Cole, I feel like, has been looking at himself from the same lens since like 10 years ago. Like he's
You
like
can't say that.
I mean, this is just what I think.
KOD is
No,
not.
no,
KOD
I
is
feel
not
like
like
this is just what I
Born
think.
Sinner.
This is like, it's not born sinner, but I'm saying he looks at himself in the perspective of, okay, I'm one of the top 3 guys. I got to do what I got to do. KOD, I feel like, was his attempt at like a real conceptual album, but like it missed on some marks, bro. Like it was solid. You're saying it's solid, but it wasn't hitting like Kendrick when Kendrick made To Pimp a Butterfly, right? Like
But you can't compare that, bro.
No, you can't compare it. But I feel like that's how he was seeing himself.
I get what you're saying.
In a comparison, in a race to be part of the big 3, and that's why Kendrick had to address it like last year. Ain't no big 3, nigga. It's just big me. Because at a certain point, both of the other 2 contenders became infatuated with the versions of themselves and started seeing themselves as bigger than they are. And J. Cole in particular would always talk about how he's the best rapper. He is the best rapper. Nobody can see him. And then when push comes to shove, what happened with him, bro? He fucking fell off and he said, all right, I'm sorry, I apologize. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't stand on business.
I get what you're saying.
He didn't stand on it. So, like, so in my opinion, it's just like the reason why it isn't coming off the same anymore is because when he was talking about it before, it was his authentic self that he was talking about, his perspective. And then once you got to a certain point, he started thinking about himself a different way because of public perception. And that's when it started going off the rails a little bit. Because now when you're leaning on public perception, now the public can dictate which way you're going. You saying that he's corny? All right, bro. Well, like anything he does could be corny at this point. If he feeds into that, it's going to happen. J. Cole, I feel like for too long has been influenced by other people on the type of music that he makes. And like, he even said it on Might Delete Later. He thinks about stuff too hard and he wants to drop stuff, but he doesn't know if it's going to hit. And he just has to have somebody else tell him, like, bro, I promise you, bro, this gonna hit, bro. Like, just put it out. And, like, he's like, all right, bro. I feel like he, as an artist, just struggles on, like, filtering out, like, what do I put out there? Like, what am I saying to these people? Because, like, I don't really know at this point. Is he being true to himself? I don't know.
I totally get what you're saying. We're going more into the future. For this album, man, and this time period, J. Cole was untouchable. Even Sideline Story, which I think is a solid debut album, especially for Rock Nation trying to make numbers. J. Cole has been climbing. He's been proving himself. For Your Eyes Only, like I said, isn't one of my favorite projects, but it's a dope project, especially if you really like J. Cole's storytelling. And even this second half damn near has made me appreciate maybe that more.
But I'm saying, like, at this point, when he dropped this, what was the most recent Kendrick album? Good Kid, Mad City. What was the most recent Drake album? I think Nothing Was the Same. I'm pretty sure. All 3 of these artists were in their prime. And they were being heavily compared, whether you agree with comparing artists or not, like, neither here nor there. But all these 3 artists were being heavily compared. And I felt like the people were talking about, like, which one was better, right? And, that's fair. It's up to the people. But from this point forward, I felt like J. Cole took it upon himself to talk about himself as if he was one of the best rappers, the top 3 rappers. And he was but he was consistently saying it, right? And that's fair.
Mainstream wise, who's better than J. Cole?
When
right now,
push comes to shove,
besides okay, but look,
it's J. Cole. J. Cole obviously is better.
So what are you? Okay,
this is also a knock on Drake too. I feel like Drake also
fell off
into it and thought that he was top of the line. He was top shit, right? But at that point, when you let other people's opinions influence you, you lose that sense of like what made you in that top 3. What put you in that top 3 originally? As time goes on, it's been 10 years, bro. It's actually been 11 years, long, right?
J. Cole has been holding up to a certain standard bar-wise, and he's been keeping that, right? Now, sometimes it doesn't make the best songs. And I think that he's lost that with time. And this is the perfect example of him making bar good songs and hit songs, right? But it's easy to crap on him right now because he's not dropping the best projects. He's delaying the fall off for years at this point, and he's like dropping out of a rap battle that you should be competing in if you're talking like you're the best. But like, if you listen to this project or you listen to some of his other projects, it fits. He's always been upfront. He's always been wearing his feelings on his sleeve. So I feel like, yeah, he might not should have dropped out. But to me, it doesn't take away from him being one of the better rappers in the game, mainstream. I thought Mike DeadLeigh was solid. I know you didn't like it as much as me, especially considering the situation, but like, so it's like,
no, I think it's solid too. But like at this point in his career, when he was in 2014, he was on the top of his game. This is when you could have said J. Cole was top 3.
You still could.
You could have said You could have said J. Cole was top 1, and I would have been like,
okay,
yeah,
that's different. Yeah, that's different.
I'm for real though. I'm saying you could have said he was top 1, and I would have been like, yeah. But like at a certain point, bro, like the paths diverge. I'm not trying to compare too much, but this is kind of like where J. Cole's narrative was in 2014 was he was being compared very heavily to
he mentions him
on
like I said, January 28th, and he mentions Drake. You ain't Drizzy Drake or Kendrick Lamar. Check the birth date,
exactly.
Nigga. You ain't
like
the guy.
It was
he says
it
that.
was a very timely kind of discourse about him. And after this, I felt like Kendrick went one way with To Pimp a Butterfly, and he went another way with For Your Eyes Only. And just like the way that these two cats like display other people's perspectives, I feel like Kendrick is like better at incorporating it than J. Cole is. And J. Cole like tried it on For Your Eyes Only, and he succeeded to a lot of people. And then after that, I felt like he didn't really know where to go with. He has this like the rapper syndrome of like, I'm so good where I can talk about like how good I am, but I don't know what else to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to talk about. I don't have any life experiences that I want to talk about. I don't have anything else that's going on in my life I want to talk about. I'm just talking about how good I am as a rapper. Take that how you want to. I don't care. But people will tell you that, right? And what will they tell you in the argument? They'd be like, technically, like, way he raps, like how fast he raps and how he does like his metaphors and stuff, he's technically the best rapper. He's not rapping from his soul no more. He's rapping from a place of, and I'm not connecting with it like I was when he was rapping just to rap in the back of the day. Because when he was rapping to rap, that's when we were saying J. Cole is top 3. Now he's rapping to be like, I'm the best. Now it's coming off of, you looking funny in the light because, like I said, you come back to that beef, bro. And it's like you talk all that talk. When the push comes to shove and you not stepping up to the plate, you look funny in the light from the perspective of somebody who's listening to J. Cole since like, 2012 back then. The way that he touts himself, the way that he expresses himself. He expresses himself as being one of the best. And I'm just saying that ego, that image, whatever, it's been shattered by No Name. It's been shattered by Kendrick. It's been shattered by Common Discourse. It's been shattered over and over and over again. And I'm not saying that J. Cole is not one of the best premier rappers, because I do wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that he is one of the better mainstream rappers, top 5, if not top 3. But it's just the way that he kind of carried himself after that. I feel like he lost the public like sway. Like people used to really be on J. Cole's side. People used to really ride for J. Cole. And now I don't see nobody riding for J. Cole nowadays, bro.
Maybe
you the biggest J. Cole supporter in my eyes at this point, because I have never seen somebody ride as hard for J. Cole as you are in this video. Like, people don't take up arms for J. Cole nowadays, bro. They don't act like he is one of the best, bro. They are disappointed in him.
Okay, but you gotta think, a lot of people, when we talk about this with rap music, DeadLeigh, it doesn't take away from what you said. I do agree that I was way disappointed to see how he handled this situation, right? But it's like, people want beef. People want blood. And we saw how far this beef went. And someone who listens to J. Cole, and someone who, I feel like J. Cole is obviously inspired by his brothers. And he sees Drake and he sees Kendrick as his brothers. and he got involved in something that he shouldn't have gotten involved in, is that his fault? Yes, to a certain degree. No, when you're too far in the mix, right? I do see that there's a level of like he made the smart decision, and that's why I kind of don't really hold it against him. I do hold him not dropping the fall off. It's been too long. Drop that shit, especially if this is a part of the plot, right? I think J. Cole, especially during this period, was, especially hearing these bonus tracks, like he was on something else. These bonus tracks added a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
You kept these on the shelf. You kept a song with Bone Thugs and Harmony on the shelf. You kept Winter Wonderland on the shelf. That's crazy to me. Those tracks can make certain people's albums. I think he did that to prove himself a little bit. And I think it was warranted. Because you have people like you who are saying, man, you know, you've been disappointing for years in a row. And I get it. But I liked K.O.D.
Then you come back to this one, bro, and you listen to those 8 new tracks, and you like he didn't lose a step because like this was his prime, bro. This was his prime right here. Like, and you can't convince me that like after this, like I was not the biggest K.O.D. fan. I'm gonna be honest with you. I liked some of the tracks, but I was very much so like caught up in the narratives of like comparing rappers, right? And I was comparing rappers, and I was like, hey man, like I'm listening to Butterfly, I'm listening to K.O.D. These are not the same level types of album. But that album is also not touching 2014 Forest Hill Drive. Like, that is not touching that level of J. Cole. I felt like J. Cole really hit his peak on this album. Like, this was the best version of J. Cole. Like, it didn't get better than this. And I will say that, like, that version of J. Cole is, like, still up there with, like, the best version of Kendrick Lamar. 100%. Right? But, like, after that point, all I'm saying is that the perspective and, like, whatever J. Cole wanted to talk about, I didn't feel like he was being true to himself as an artist, and he was letting other people's perspectives and opinions on him influence what he was releasing, and that ultimately led to him being a lesser version of himself, and it led to him being the person that we know nowadays, you know, and the person that people be memeing on, dunking on, and I honestly, I think the J. Cole disrespect goes too far at times. Like, I feel like, you know, like, he doesn't deserve it. I feel like even Wet Dreams, like, I feel like that was a very, like, honest, you know, open song. Like, I don't think that it was that corny, but, like, I could see how you could say that. But, like, during the time, bro, like, that was, like, one of the best songs. Like, it was on the radio. People was playing it. Like, people were not making fun of this track. And then obviously, after you get like 3-4 years down the line, you can be like, hey, bro, like that track was kind of corny back in the day. Yeah. But like during when it came out, you was listening to it. I saw you was bumping it. You knew all the lyrics. Like, why you switching up? You know, like.
Get off my dick is like.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I get what you're saying.
He really had hits, bro. He really had that moment. And like that was the moment in time when you could tell me that there was a big 3 in rap, and I would be like 100% yes, bro. Because any one of those dudes, I could call them number one. Nobody would scoff at it, you know? After that time influx, you know, I feel like everybody kind of just went on their own path and was like, you know, either J. Cole's the best, Kendrick's the best, J. Cole's the best. Some of the artists started believing that too. Drake and J. Cole, I feel like they really started believing that they were the best. And complacency, bro. Complacency. Drake is worst version of it. Like, he's definitely way more complacent than J. Cole. But I feel like J. Cole, to a certain degree, lost sight of, like, what actually made him a great artist. And it's not the technical ability, bro. It's not just you can make a bar out of this. You can, you know, you can tell this type of perspective. It's what came from you, from within, that I connected to the most. And it's just the way that you did it, you know, that came off really great. And even though you can still kind of do those same kind of technical abilities, they don't come off the same because I just feel like it's not coming straight from him. It's coming from a place of trying to, like, please people.
This is the double platinum with no features meme right here. This is where it kind of started, right? Do you think he should start having no features on this album again? Or what do you think would help? The way you're talking, it seems like you've kind of distanced yourself from J. Cole, and that's fine. I get it.
I don't think that no features will necessarily change it. But what I do think will change it is a refreshing perspective. Just a different perspective, you know, like we knew J. Cole to be this super confident, like he's really been doing his own shit, like he's really been putting on. I need him to take a step back, take a second, look around, really just talk about like stuff in his life. J. Cole, I feel like he hit that high and then he was like trying to get back to there ever since, but he couldn't hit it. He just really needs a fresh perspective. I feel like it's been too long where he's been saying he's this and that, but he hasn't been proving it, bro. He hasn't been showing that he is this and that. He's been saying it, but it hasn't been connecting with people. And I feel like that's where all the memes, the down talk on J. Cole comes from, is that he doesn't actually show what he does. He talks about what he does, and people don't buy that shit, bro. It's not real. It's not authentic.
Something has to change with his next album. I do agree with you.
That's definitely, you weren't him when you need to be him, you know? It's disappointing. For a lot of people, 10 years in the making, this take right here, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I really do fuck with J. Cole in this era. All these bonus tracks are hits to me. I love every single one of them. I feel like he could do no wrong. If he has more in the vault from this era, I would love to hear it, because I just, you know, like even the unfinished stuff, like obviously it was like the worst track on here because it was like the shortest and it was like the less polished. Yeah, bro, like I'll take anything from this era, because like this was him when he was just speaking from
he was
the heart.
connecting with it. Yeah, these tracks, even the bonus tracks, they connected with me a lot. It was crazy to hear that even from this time. He's a little bit older than us, obviously, but talking about a lot of stuff that I can relate to nowadays. At that point, it shows how talented he was, especially for the time.
I can definitely go back in this and like listen to it like as a moment, and like I don't have any influence on me from like what he's done recently, you know, like I can listen to this and just be like, man, like as an artist, like what was he doing in this moment? Like this was great, like this was the best like he was at. But then like you get to the more recent stuff and it's just like, man, like it's not the same to me. It just doesn't. And like just during this moment in 2014, he had just dropped Born Sinner. This was his album after that. Like he had the mixtape era. Like he was building himself up and he was reaching like the mountaintop. And then he just took the little sled and he just started riding down the mountain, you know? And there's nothing wrong with it. I feel like this is a really great peak. And I feel like his name is in the history books from this point forward because of this album and because of Born Sinner, 100%. And I think he could drop Kid Cudi rock style album after this and it still wouldn't tarnish his legacy enough. Like he would still be touted as like one of the best premier rappers of the 2010s. 100%.
I think it would, because the way you're talking right now, right? You're kind of saying that because of what he's doing now, if he really just drops a horrible album, you would be like, yeah, this dude never was at that point. Actually, I wouldn't say never, but like he's fallen off completely, right? And I do think that that's where the pressure with the fall off is. He has to follow up, especially considering he dropped out of this beef. He's done all this stuff since then. He has to follow up. There's this uncertainty because of what you did.
I'm just saying that, like, because I have a certain level of respect for him, like, I'm going to always see him in a certain way as when he dropped this album, you know, because I knew what it was like in that moment when he dropped. But I understand what you're saying, yeah. People who are, you know, newer listeners or, like, people who are trying to get in J. Cole is definitely going to be, like, a tell of, like, you know, how people are going to perceive his music from this point on, because people always listen to the newest shit. You know, I mean, you go back to any artist, any older artist, and you look at their music, the first album that's going to pop up is going to be the album that's the newest. So people are going to tend to go back to that, and they're going to tend to, you know, try to check that out to get into an artist. So it's going to matter a lot, the fall off. And I think that he does have some pressure on him, especially from his fans from his older days, because we want to see that J. Cole that didn't give a fuck about what anybody else had to say and wanted to speak his mind. Go against the industry standard, go against, you know, what people were doing regularly in pop culture, was enlightened to a certain degree, conscious to a certain degree. He's always been a real cat. I mean, even if it like comes off as corny sometimes with like him riding his bike instead of, you know, driving somewhere, you know, like it comes off as real, bro. Like it comes off as him wanting to be his real self. So just like, What is he going to do on this project? It's going to be his most anticipated project in so long. I really don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Is it going to shape my perspective more, or am I going to think the same thing? I really don't know. Let me hear your top 3 from here, bro. What is it on here? Out of all the tracks.
My top 3, number 1, January 28th. I love that track. One of my favorite J. Cole tracks, period. The cockiness, just talking about everything. The way it's kind of like, an intro into the album. Dope. Number 2, I love Winter Wonderland. I was fighting with that or Judgment Day. But Winter Wonderland, I love the hook on that. And I just love the flow. I think that was a crazy ass track. 3, Get Off My Dick. Just because of memories. So that is my top 3. What about you, DeadLeigh?
My top 3, I'm going to put Black Man in Hollywood on there for sure.
Yes.
I felt like that one could have subbed out for Saint Tropez. They're pretty similar as far as, like the thematics. It felt like it was a part of the original track list originally. I also got Winter Wonderland on there. Have to. That's one of the best tracks on here. 100%. Even standing up to the old ones. And then I'm going to pick something different. I'm going to pick 03 Adolescence just because I felt like that one.
I was going to pick that one.
In general. Things change, rearrange, and so do I.
Crazy.
It ain't always for the better, dog. I can't lie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That track in general spoke to me when I was a kid. Had a certain narrative that like really did it for me, and I felt like that was like the intro to the meat of the project. Like we had the intro, we had January 28th, but then I felt like when Wet Dreams kind of took me out of it, but then 03 Adolescence put me right back in, and then right after that we have A Tale of Two Cities, we have Fire Squad, Saint Tropez, Get Off My Dick. That was like the start of like a killer 5-6 track run. Right? Yeah, that song just takes me back to a certain point in time. So,
yeah, that's a banger.
It's got it.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's got it. All right, y'all. With that being said, thank y'all so much for watching this video. If y'all made it to the end, I appreciate y'all so much. Much love. Make sure y'all like, y'all comment, y'all subscribe. Show us some love back. Y'all know y'all boys trying to make partners on YouTube. So don't hold back, man. Share with your granny. Share with your auntie, bro. Share with your uncle. I don't care, bro. Like, get somebody else on the Hip Hop Babies wave. J. Cole, if you heard this, no hate. Much love. Just trying to keep it real. Just trying to keep it peasy. Hey, man, thank you for this project. Y'all should definitely check this out if you haven't checked it out before. It is a hip-hop classic. And thank you so much, Ray, for being a gracious co-host. You are the best co-host in the game, and nobody does it like you. So I'm going to pass it off to you and talk to these people, all right?
Yeah, as usual, shout out to DeadLeigh. Appreciate you doing your thing. Doing a great job as usual, right? Appreciate it. Shout out to everyone listening, everyone watching. We appreciate every view. We appreciate every listen. We appreciate every comment. So if you got something to say, don't be afraid to leave it below about this album, about anything in general. If you want to see us talk about something, if you got something to send us and you want to send it to us to talk about, let us know. J. Cole, if you listening, of course, we not expecting you to tune in like that, but man, we appreciate this album. I can't speak enough alone about how much this album has impacted probably a lot of people and impacted myself, especially in 2014, man. This was a crazy time for me, and I think that you really painted that picture and just like let it out there. Like I said, you're older than me, but at the time this related to me a lot. So I think you really were able to do that really well. And you've grown from that. Maybe not as much as others expect you to, but I do think you have gotten out of this bubble a little bit. So I appreciate that as well. To everybody else on here, the bonus tracks, to everybody who produced on this, we appreciate you as well. With that being said, peace.